Hi everyone, I'm Cyrus, Research Analyst at iFAST, and today I'm joined by 𝗪𝘆𝘀, Client Relationship Manager of BNP Paribas Asset Management, a recognized leader in sustainable investing since 2002. In this episode, we are here to discuss and identify investment opportunities that abound in water equities and assess how investing in water-related sectors could enhance investors' portfolios. So without further ado, let's dive into the questions for today.
Hi Cyrus, nice to meet you and thank you for having me here.
Thank you for joining us today. So first up, water equities have been around for some time now. Could you begin by sharing how the sector as a whole has performed relative to global equities from both a performance and a risk standpoint?
Sure, so if we take a look at how water equities have performed as a whole, let's say going back to 20 years ago, for an investment of $100 starting from November 2003, that $100 today would approximately be worth $815. Annualized, that's pretty remarkable. We're looking at about 11% returns on an annualized basis every year for the last 20 years. And relative to global equities, that's close to 50% more. Relative to US equities, it's about 30% more. So definitely a value add from an investment standpoint.
Apart from the transition to a sustainable economy, what do you think are some factors that are driving the long-term growth opportunities in the water sector?
So perhaps let's look at things from a supply and demand perspective, beginning with the supply side of things. So when we look at the Earth as a planet in our minds, we would picture a lot of blue, a lot more blue than green in fact. And factually this is correct. The Earth does have more water than land. Approximately 70% of the Earth's surface comprises water. But what is interesting to note is that 97% of that is actually salt water, which is not usable. We can't drink it, we can't use it to irrigate our crops, and we certainly can't use it for our manufacturing processes. And when we look at the remaining 3% of freshwater supply which is accessible to us via rivers and lakes, only 1% or actually less than 1% of that 3% is accessible to us. So I would say when we look at water from a scarcity point of view, it is already very scarce. And when we examine the demand factors, it's going to be even scarcer. So let's look at population first and foremost. That would be one thing to think about. Now, the World Economic Forum estimates that by 2050, 68% of the world's population is going to live in urbanized cities. And that is going to drastically drive up the demand for water. In fact, it's estimated that someone living in urban areas consumes 5 to 8 times more water than somebody living in non-urban areas. And secondly, from a water catchment perspective, cities comprise a lot of concrete, so that makes it difficult for water to penetrate the ground and to reach your roots and your soil and to grow your crops. So as a result, you tend to have increased incidences of flooding in cities, and that is where the opportunity then comes in for companies to provide their technologies, their products or their services to help mitigate against such instances. Next up, let's talk about climate change. So of late, we have seen a lot of flooding in various countries in the world. Not only flooding, but also various instances of drought as well. So this not only destabilizes the water supply, but at the same time, we also have increased cases of pollutants entering our water supply. And there again lies the investment opportunity for companies to come in with their products, their services, and their technologies to help. Let's talk about infrastructure, another big factor driving the demand side for water. Why we say infrastructure is because in many countries in the world today, even developed countries like the US, for example, a lot of their water infrastructure has been around for the last 75 to 100 over years old, and water infrastructure is certainly not built to last forever. So in a study that was recently conducted by the American Water Works Association in 2011, it was estimated that approximately 1/3 of the infrastructure in the US needs to be replaced by 2040. So that's certainly a billion-dollar investment opportunity for companies who are able to come in and provide their necessary services and products. And last but not least, from a regulation type of perspective, we have seen many countries across the world acknowledging the fact that water is not just something to think about. In fact, water is something that should be regarded as an economic asset. And as such, we've seen a lot of legislation, a lot of regulatory policies, and even spending plans come to fruition. For example, we have the Inflation Reduction Act signed into law last year by US President Biden, where it's estimated that approximately $10 billion is going to be allocated towards various water areas such as drought resilience, areas such as flood mitigation, areas such as water infrastructure, and even water technology. And even closer to home in Singapore, the PUB has allocated approximately 680 million Singapore dollars over the course of the next 15 years towards water technologies and building up Singapore into a research hub.
Could you touch more on some of the interesting opportunities, technologies, innovations that are poised to greatly influence the water sector in the years ahead?
Sure. There are numerous, but I'll just touch on a few. One that really comes to mind would be smart irrigation. So this would enable farmers, for example, who are operating in very dry and arid climates to be able to boost their yield, and in fact, in places where it's not even possible to grow crops at the moment, to be able to grow crops. So with this technology, you place sensors into the soil, and these sensors would be able to tell farmers the condition of the soil, how much water to use, what kind of crops to place, how much fertilizer, and even help with weather prediction as well. So that is when we talk about smart irrigation. We also look towards water reuse as another area of opportunity that we like. So water reuse has to do with the recycling theme, which is something that's all the rage right now, and we like it very much because we don't want to think of wastewater as waste. In many countries, US is another very good example, especially when we look towards the southwest of US, which has been afflicted by a lot of drought in the last few years. You do see countries or states in the southwest of US implementing a lot of technologies to treat wastewater and turn it into reusable water. Singapore, back home here, wastewater treatment is something that the PUB is looking into quite a lot. We have New Water, for example, and just to put a figure to it, the PUB is looking to spend approximately 680 million Singapore dollars in the next 15 years to explore how we can further boost New Water as a supply to Singaporeans.
Thank you. So moving on to water solutions, what type of sector solutions do you think we are looking at, we are focusing on as we are investing into water? And does the water universe mainly consist of utility stocks?
Sure, that's a very good question. Thanks for that. So when we look at water investing as a whole, I must admit for an investor it can be quite mind-boggling because it would seem that they are a myriad of opportunities, and some may also indeed have the impression that the water equity space is comprised mainly of utility companies. Now in our fund, water utility names only comprise 18% of the fund. So it's not really true that water investing is just all about utility names. In fact, to make it easy for investors to understand, we break it down into 3 areas. So water infrastructure companies, These would be companies that provide your valves, your pipes, your tubings, your pipes. When it comes to the water sector, we're talking about water utility names. And thirdly, we're talking about water treatment companies. So companies that are involved in helping to treat for odor control, for pH control, and even helping to perhaps explore ways to remove harmful chemicals and substances or pollutants from our water supply. So these three areas mainly, and collectively speaking, I would say the opportunity set is very, very diverse. Within the fund, the investment universe numbers close to 2,000 over companies.
Wow, that's a lot of companies. Could you provide an example of one such company in your fund?
Sure. So for us in our fund, we have a minimum revenue threshold of 20%. For a company to be eligible to be a part of the investment universe, they would minimally need to be able to demonstrate that they derive at least 20% from water-related activities, products or services. And one company that comes to mind as a very good example in the portfolio is Linde. Linde is a US-listed company, and they have more than 30 years experience when it comes to water treatment-related products and services. But outside of that 20%, of course, you may have some unrelated products and services that has nothing to do with water. And that's where it gets interesting, and that's where we further value add, and we provide some level of diversification to clients' portfolios. So Linde, apart from water, what they do is they also provide industrial gases. Gases such as oxygen that you use in your hospital industry, gases such as hydrogen that you use in your aerospace industry, for example, and other types of industrial gases that you use in your manufacturing processes or even in your mining and energy sectors per se. So very good example there, and this is a company that's been around since the 1880s. So not a young company. This is just to give you some taste and flavor of the type of companies we had in the portfolio. Not to mention, this is a company that delivered over $30 billion of revenue in 2022.
Wow. Could you talk us through how the overall portfolio looks like and how it's poised to capture opportunities in the whole water domain?
Sure. So the first thing that I would mention, and it's interesting to note, is that this portfolio has a bias towards mid-caps, more so than large caps. This is not because we specifically focus on mid-caps or large caps per se, but as a result of our very research-intensive and fundamentally driven stock selection process, we uncover and we find that the best opportunities that the water space has got to offer right now is in the mid-cap space. And the second thing that I would mention is that on a geographical basis, relative to benchmark, we are underweight US and we are overweight European equities at this point in time. Once again, this is not a reflection of the fact that we may prefer European equities over US equities per se, but once again, it's a result of the fact that at this point in time, we tend to find that the gems and the higher quality names in the water security space tend to be located in Europe. And this is part and parcel to do with the fact that when it comes to policies and regulation and supporting innovation and innovation in the water security space, Europe has been one of the first countries globally to be there, relative to US, relative to Asia. That's not to say that US and Asia is not getting there. We do see policies in US and Asia stepping up, but when it comes to being at the forefront and being there from way back, Europe has always been there. So that's the reason why we overweight Europe.
Thank you. Moving on to the sector breakdown of the fund. When it comes to sectors, what do you think is noteworthy about your BNP Paribas Aqua Fund?
Sure. The first thing I would say is that we are overweight industrials very much, And that is because, once again, if we go back earlier to what I've mentioned about the profile of the companies that you tend to find in this fund, you have companies that provide valves, companies that provide pipes, fittings, equipment. So as a result, we will tend to overweight industrials a lot more relative to benchmark. And not to mention utilities names is something that we also tend to overweight versus benchmark. So a very interesting mix of defensive and cyclical sectors within the portfolio, and cutting across different business segments and catering to different consumer segments as well.
Well, investing in equities is seen as investors as something that's linked to ESG. But there is also the perception that ESG investing and performance don't necessarily go hand in hand. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, we did look at a study conducted by Oxford University in 2015. So this was a studies of studies. Underlying studies, I believe it was more than 200 other studies. So when Oxford conducted this study, what they found was quite conclusive evidence to support the fact that actually ESG investing and returns go hand in hand. Namely, when companies start to incorporate ESG metrics into the way they do business, it tends to be very supportive when we look at three areas, mainly stock price performance, operational efficiency, and also cost. It does, in fact, lead to a reduction in your costs. So very beneficial from many points, and very supportive evidence there to show that you don't have to separate the two when you look towards ESG investing.
Thank you. Those are really great insights on the water sector. So how can investors gain an exposure to all these really interesting water technologies, opportunities that you've highlighted?
Sure. None other than your platform. So that would be on iFAST and Fund Supermart. The BNP Paribas Aqua Fund is currently available in 3 different currencies: Sing dollar, US dollar, as well as euros. And for clients who are interested in a dividend payment option, the fund is available in monthly dividend payment mode in both Sing and US dollars.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Elizabeth from BNP Paribas Asset Management for sharing all your exciting insights on water companies and their latest innovations. And thank you to the viewers who are watching. We hope what Elizabeth shared today has given you some great ideas to invest in a sustainable manner.
Thank you, Cyrus. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Thank you.